Hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing? How America got so stupid. That's an insulting title, but a very intriguing title. You know, it's a reasonable question. There are a lot of stupid people here in America. I concede it. It's true. I might be one of them. I don't think you know if you're stupid, typically. I'm not sure. But it's by Brit Monkey. I've been wanting to react to this video for a long time, actually. I have waited a year. I always try to react to videos, you know, I wait a year until after they're uploaded. It's been a year, and I'm ready. 6 million views, holy crap. Check out Brit Monkey, link down below. I'm very interested to see what he's got to say. Let's do it.
You wanna know how I got this dislike ratio? I make a video praising the Soviet Union, and nobody bats an eye. I make a video praising the United States, and
Oh god, can't do that.
everybody loses their minds.
Okay, fine. I hear you. You only want to hear things that confirm what you already believe. I get it.
Damn.
Let's talk about why Americans are stupid. There's a famous episode.
It can be like that, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I have a pretty nuanced opinion about America, but if at any point I say something that's like, oh, you know, in this regard, America's pretty good, people are like, are you joking? But let's continue.
Episode of the Jimberly Kimberly live show where clueless residents of Los Angeles fail to name a single country.
Is it South Africa?
Oh my god,
Yeah,
I've reacted to this.
Country of Asia.
Greenland or Iceland or something.
Although these are no doubt cherry-picked,
You just called Alaska Iceland. Oh, they flipped the map around. Whoa. Too much for my American brain.
and I'm sure
And I know they didn't flip it around. They're showing it from a different perspective than normal. Okay. I feel like anytime I say something, I have to make sure I say it right, or else people will be like, you idiot.
although
Which is fair enough.
these are no doubt cherry-picked, and I'm sure if you stood in a big city all day and shoved a camera in people's faces and asked them questions, you'd be able to find 3 minutes worth of people who couldn't answer on the spot.
Miss, for $1, name a woman. Yeah.
But the stereotype that Americans are ignorant about the wider world is largely true. These people can't name a country because they don't care about other countries. 40% of Americans have a passport, compared
It is hard to believe. I mean, that is extremely hard to believe. I mean, Americans do care about some other countries. Like, a lot of Americans care about Mexico, for example. Some Americans care about... some Americans like myself care about, like, you know, the whole earth. I don't really think about, you know, oh, I don't care about this country. I care about this country. But, you know, most Americans care about, like, Mexico and, you know, China. Maybe what Russia's doing.
to 60%
Britain. I don't know. I don't know what most Americans do, actually. I'm going to be honest.
of Canadians and 76% of Brits. In 1994, it
Wow, only 10% of Americans have a passport. That's an interesting stat.
was only 10% of Americans. But that doesn't mean Americans have gotten more globetrotting since then. It was because after an above-average episode of the news, it became mandatory to need a passport when entering Canada and Mexico. So it's fair to say that a very small
I forgot there was ever a time before you needed a passport to get into Canada or Mexico. Although, if you're... I think you can get into Mexico without a passport. Or no. Children can get into Canada without a passport if they're driving, not through the air. It's confusing.
percent of Americans will be leaving this corner of the world. As I said in a previous video, America has all you'd ever want geographically within her borders. Why go anywhere else? The foreign cultures, maybe?
Well, I mean, maybe you can say that it's got everything you'd ever want. And I know that there are a lot of very beautiful areas in America, but there are uniquely beautiful areas elsewhere in the world that America doesn't have. I mean, that probably goes without saying, but it's important.
Why go anywhere else? The foreign cultures, maybe? Americans don't care about that either. On the list of the highest grossing movies in the USA, you have to go all the way to 520th place to get a movie that isn't American.
Well, America's got Hollywood. Like, the whole world is kind of overrepresented on American movies. A lot of them. We make a lot of movies. If you didn't know.
It's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, by the way. Couldn't even beat The Nutty Professor. Somebody please check up on Ang Lee. I think he might have killed himself. Neither do global affairs hold the average American's interest. When asked about the Kyoto Climate Accords, who the Taliban are, or who Nicolas Sarkozy is, Americans are woefully underinformed compared to other developed nations. In 2009,
How would you not know who the Taliban is?
only half knew that last year's Olympics were held in Beijing. Oh, but of course, when asked to name American celebrities, they had no trouble
God.
at all.
I can proudly say I would have some trouble about the celebrities.
At the same time,
So maybe I'm stupid geopolitically, but I'm also stupid about celebrities. So there.
we non-Americans are flooded with American culture. Some British people know more about American politics and history than their own.
Once you're dropped into the trench, depth, or the z-axis is...
It's Z-axis, you floppy-haired moron. France had to pass laws banning radio stations from playing too much American music.
What? That's a law?
There are only 2 countries in the world where Coca-Cola is not sold. Wait, scratch that. This journalist from Finland bought a Coke at a water park in Pyongyang in 2017. And what's this hiding in the background of somebody's holiday snaps at the National Hotel de Cuba? Look, you know
What?
something's up when remote tribesmen in the
So there's 0 countries where you can't buy a Coke. Got it.
Amazon rainforest who don't even have electricity know who Michael Jackson is. Americans used to be quite well read. After the Second World War, Americans consumed 63% of all the newspapers in the world,
Wow.
and they used this to their advantage. In no-
That's sad. I mean, obviously, newspapers in general are just dying. It's a dying format. But that's sad that America used to be so well read. Because, oh man, that is not that is not a statement I would make about Americans today. Yeah, no.
1948, the newly formed United Nations created a list of human rights that all countries should strive to uphold. One area that Americans were particularly interested in was this one, Article 19. Everyone has the right to freedom of expression and opinion, and receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. What the USA wanted was
That's cool.
a completely level playing field. Anyone can buy any media from any other country. A global free market of ideas, released from the shackles of censorship. For if anyone can gain access to the truth, we cannot be marched into the same kind of ignorance and intolerance that characterized the Axis nations of the war. This is admirable. Freedom of speech is a core value of the United States and many other allied nations. But some delegates, like those from India, questioned the US's motives. If you believe in an equal access to information and culture,
You know, what I'm thinking is, he said freedom of speech is, important to a lot of allied nations, which I agree that in certain aspects it for sure is. But from what I understand, most other countries have. It's just a little bit more complicated. It's kind of interesting, like freedom of speech, but with an asterisk, which is kind of true of America as well, but to less an extent.
to the US's motives. If you believe in an equal access to information and culture, shouldn't you redistribute some of your media creating capacity to developing nations like ours, so that we have an equal opportunity to tell the world our stories? The Americans would not budge. Of course, they knew deep down that India was right. The American delegation to the convention was highly populated by journalists and media magnates. They knew that if countries couldn't afford their own news, they would be increasingly reliant on buying news from American wire companies like the Associated Press, which was good for both
This is where shit starts to go a little bit haywire, huh?
media
It goes from noble to not.
companies' profits, but also the US State Department, who would no doubt have been licking their lips at the prospect of 1 billion people reading news with a specific American spin on it.
Yeah.
In 1944, the Associated Press sold news to 38 countries. Within 8 years, that had doubled to 70 countries. In the 1950s, around half...
That's kind of sad to hear that there was this like kind of ulterior motive and incentive to do that. To spread, news. Oh, let's have an open market of news and media.
of films shown in European and Asian cinemas were American, 2/3 in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. Which makes sense. Americans made grand Technicolor films brimming with Hollywood sparkle because they could afford to, whereas war-torn Europe, impoverished Mexico, and nuclear-obliterated Japan were stuck making small-scale comedies to keep up morale. One of the most popular French movies in 40s France was 1949's The Big Day, a mostly plotless movie where a whimsical French postman gets into...
I never thought about the timeline of kind of the proliferation of film alongside World War II. That is really actually quite fascinating. That makes a lot of sense.
Wacky mischief in a quaint village. There just wasn't the money or resources for anything else. Hollywood captured the European public's imagination, and they wanted more. But why is it only a one-way street? Because while you can do or say whatever you want within the United States, the Constitution also says that the American government can regulate what goes in or out. During the Cold War, anything that might be considered communist propaganda could be seized by the post office and never delivered.
And I mean, it's actually interesting to read on the history of free speech within America because, to be honest, it's really left up to the interpretation of the Supreme Court, and throughout history, it has varied wildly what their interpretation is. So it's not just like, oh, America's always had this free speech and it's always been, just perfectly defined. No, not at all.
Books or even souvenirs from communist countries, for example. Pamphlets criticizing US foreign policy.
We love all media. Open the world up to media. Unless it's media we don't like, then shut it down.
Communist countries, for example. Pamphlets criticizing
That kind of sums up humans in general, to be honest.
US foreign policy. Immigration reached a low point in the early 70s.
And America is no better.
With only 4.7% of Americans being foreign-born, limiting Americans' interaction with different cultures. Obviously, it wasn't totally like North Korea. Plenty of foreign movies and music were allowed into the US. But the media that caught on was either already Americanized or so plastically exotic that it doesn't really say anything about the culture where it's from. The Beatles were British, yes, but they got their start covering American rock and roll musicians. When
I didn't know they covered rock and roll. I didn't know they covered other musicians, I should say.
Yes, but
I love the Beatles.
They got their start covering American rock and roll musicians. When John Lennon stepped out of line, the American government made sure that he knew it. Movies imported from Japan were mostly samurai flicks, and very few movies set in the modern day. The film Ikiru is widely considered the best Japanese film ever made, if you ignore people who have never felt the touch of a woman. But this existential drama about a depressed, lonely man was only given a...
Some anime is just phenomenal.
But this existential drama about a depressed, lonely man was only given a limited release in California, and the poster was edited to feature a stripper who is only in the movie for 1 minute. The narrow stream of European movies that made it into the USA came in the form of the French New Wave cinema, movies that were stylistically inspired by American films, but also so stuffy that few audiences would ever want to watch them anyway.
Qu'est-ce que ça peut te faire?
Ça ne va pas, non?
Non, rien. Je voulais dire cette phrase avec une idée précise. Je ne savais pas quelle était la meilleure façon d'exprimer cette idée. Ou plutôt, je le savais. Et maintenant, je ne sais plus.
This was further stifled by the Hays Code, a set of extremely strict regulations that were in place from 1934 to 1968. If you've ever wondered why old black and white films seem so dry, it's because of these rules.
Really?
Some things that were completely banned from ever being shown in any film included.
See, this is kind of what I mean. Freedom of expression. Except you can't show that on TV, and you can't show that or that or that or that, and this is banned, and you're going to jail. Interesting.
Bad guys winning. All movies had to end with the police outwitting the evil criminals or the criminals causing their own demise.
You know, that is something I have not thought much about, which is quite fascinating when you really kind of step back and think about it, about the regulations on what's allowed to be broadcasted in America, like on TV and on the radio and stuff. And it's like, I guess the radio is a lot more lenient, but as far as TV, why should it be restricted at all? Why should it be censored if we have freedom of expression, freedom of speech? Then who are these regulators saying, "Oh, you can't say that on TV because it's a TV." You don't have to watch TV. You could change the channel, turn it off. You know, it's just weird.
Eyes. Any nudity, even the silhouette of a booba, is an instant ban. Blood or dead bodies. When people get shot in old films, they usually just clutch the wound, but no actual blood is seen. Pointing a gun at somebody in the same frame. This is why guns are always held at waist height. Kissing for longer than 3 seconds.
What?
Interracial couples. White people as slaves.
What?
Criticism of religion.
That's actually so messed up that these, man. See, this is what I mean. Like, this is why you can't have, or in my opinion, regulating this type of stuff. You can try to say, oh, you know, we know what's best to regulate the free expression. And then you look back on it decades later, you're like, what the hell? White people as slaves. You can't show that.
Religion or of any other country. Naturally, this prevented the more artistically liberal European films from being shown in American cinemas, and when they did get a US release, they were usually edited to remove the violence in
That lady's scary.
movies and sex on TV to comply with the good old-fashioned values. At least until the rules were abolished in 1968 and replaced by the age rating system we have today.
Which, that's at least better.
Even as the Cold War ended and the internet gave Americans unparalleled access to the rest of the world and all of human knowledge, they still preferred to hang out on a handful of American-made websites dominated by Americans.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I don't know. It's kind of surprising that
On a
that
handful
is
of
the case, that so many of the world's websites are. And I understand there are websites outside of America that are popular, and I've probably never even heard of them.
American-made
But let's be honest, a whole lot of these websites are popular internationally and are made by Americans. And I
website
really don't know why that's the case, because I know there's a huge amount of extremely talented programmers and such outside America. So I look forward to a day. You know, now the first thing to really kind of break that mold in a huge way to me is TikTok. Which I don't know how I feel about it, because apparently it's spying on everything you do, but then again, so are these apps. But TikTok's, you know, obviously a Chinese app, and it's like the biggest app in the world now. So there you go. Not American. I would prefer it to be like a European app, though. I feel like that would be... You guys have really good laws and regulations about privacy online and disclosures. So I think we need a big app to come out of Europe. I'm sure there are. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I can't think of one. That's crazy.
It's dominated by Americans. The insular culture of 20th century America has carried over to the 21st. Tightened border security after Septiembre Undécimo means foreign musicians can have a hard time getting visas. In 2002, the touring visa of a German orchestra was cancelled after it was discovered the cellist had a criminal record for shoplifting a pair of tweezers in 1991. When they tried again for a visa in 2004,
Damn.
the cellist had to undergo an hour-long interview with Homeland Security and had to physically pick up his visa from the US Embassy. Global culture...
Isn't that just freaking crazy? It's so weird, the juxtaposition on that versus, like, I don't know. I don't want to talk about controversial subjects, but, and I always say, like, I'm not even being political, but the facts of the matter are that a lot of people come in through our southern border without any documentation of who they are or anything. And, like, millions of people. And yet, a cellist coming here, it's like, oh, you shoplifted tweezers. We got to interrogate you. Like, that's weird.
Cultures might be more present in American media, but they're always through the lens of American characters, such as The Last Samurai starring Tom Cruise, where he plays a white guy in 1870s Japan. 7 Years in Tibet, another American in China. Indiana Jones, American in Egypt. The Bourne Identity, American in France. Inglourious Bastards, Americans in German-occupied France. And for the ladies in the audience, Mamma Mia. For a movie set on a Greek island, there's not a single Greek person in the entire movie.
Wow.
Is there any hope for America, or are
This is weird when he points it out like that.
they destined to be a stinky, dumb redneck country forever? Maybe. In 2000, 92% of the music in the USA Top 50 was American, making it the second most insulated market in the world after Pakistan. But today, it's more
We're number 2.
like 60%, with Brits, Canadians, Latin Americans, and Africans making themselves more seen in the charts.
And I feel like Australians, my God, so many Australian musicians. The UK is always killing it in music. At least there's that. Like, I don't know what it is with the film industry, but in the music industry, we do have some variety.
Each year, there are
Some.
more foreign films nominated at the Academy Awards than ever before. What used to be an American-only pay-to-win awards show
Ha.
is now an international pay-to-win
Yeah.
awards show. As social media platforms have an element of
You can look into that because that's pretty much the facts of the matter.
randomness
Pay to win.
in what they show users, there is a higher chance of Americans being shown videos from other countries, forcing them to take note of what is happening. It seems the revolution will be TikToked. I've been giving the impression throughout this video that it's all or most Americans who are terminally uneducated. But American ignorance isn't as evenly distributed as you'd think. That
I wouldn't think it was, to be honest. I think America's has a wild spectrum of in all sorts of different axes. One of which is education. Huge spectrum.
study I mentioned earlier, when adjusting for English proficiency, income, and education levels, Americans are really no different from their European counterparts, and in some cases, marginally smarter. Knowledge about the wider world even correlates to political views, and not in the way that you'd think. A 2022 survey asked Americans 12 questions about the world, such as, who is the British Prime Minister? What
Oh man, I need to take this.
12
I need to write this down.
questions about the world,
What
such
was
as
it?
2022 correlates
I'm sorry guys, I just need to write this down. I'm excited.
to political views, and not in the way that you'd think. A 2022 survey asked Americans 12 questions about the world, such as, who is the British Prime Minister? What does the Indian flag look like? And what this
I don't think he was specific on where it came from, but I'm writing that. I'm going to try to find it.
simply were committed Democrats and committed Republicans. Swing voters, those enlightened centrist chads, were the stupidest. Only 40% of moderate Republicans could name the US Secretary of State, compared to 60% of convicted Republicans. Only half of moderate Democrats knew that the USMCA trade agreement replaced NAFTA, compared to 66% of convicted Democrats. Also, I just thought it was funny that the more Americans know about the European Union, the more favourable view they have of it. So are Americans
That's an interesting fact. That's kind of telling, huh?
know about the European Union, the more favourable view they have of it. So are Americans ignorant? Many of them are. But it isn't their fault. It's a mix of geography, American imperialism,
Now, if it isn't our fault, then whose is it?
Cold War paranoia, moral puritanism, and economic factors that create a paradox.
All perpetuated by who? Mostly us. I mean, I guess that's an interesting question. It's kind of interesting just fundamentally about most things. Is anything really your own fault? Or is it all just, you just a victim of your own circumstances and your own nature, your DNA?
Nation that is both the most expansive empire, but also an informational prison of their own making. God bless you, stupid bastards.
Wow. That was quite a treat. I really enjoyed that. Great video. Brit Monkey. Check him out, link down below. Curious to read a couple comments. Honestly, as an American, I feel like a lot of people here are becoming proud of how stupid they are. You see it everywhere on social media. Actually, there's actually literally like literal truth to that. Where on TikTok, there's this trend among like, you know, the younger generations in particular. Well, I guess exclusively, because the trend is, oh, I can't believe how silly we are and how unserious and how we're the new adults. That's the thing. Like, we're the new adults and we're so clueless and silly, and it's like, why are you? That's not good. In fairness, knowing who the British Prime Minister is at a given time in recent years isn't an easy question. That is freaking true. My God. I'm Canadian and lived in the US, and I was asked on multiple occasions to speak Canadian. Oh my God. Okay, I can't read any more comments. Those just start to trigger me. God damn, there's some stupid people. Why do they gotta live here in America? Well, I just learned why. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys tomorrow.